Hello and welcome to Trad Jazz Today. Dan Zeilinger has been a world-traveling trad jazz musician for the past 40 years. Some of his most memorable performances were on the lawn of the Edinburgh Castle, at the Imperial Palace in Japan, as well as TV shows and commercials around the world. Dan has met many people during his career and has spent many hours on and off stage with these musicians, talking about jazz, life, and more. Some are touring musicians, some are theme park warriors, and some are casual musicians who play on weekends with their friends. They all have stories worthy of a movie script, and through these interviews, Dan will be sharing them with you. Now, Dan Zeilinger.
Hi there, this is Dan Zeilinger with Trad Jazz Today. My next guest is somebody who we should have run into each other by now with all the friends we have in common. A guy who books himself as a traditional drummer, and it's just unusual that somebody says traditional in front of drummer when they're playing jazz styles, which is great. But here he is, Mr. Danny Coots. Hi, Danny.
Hi, how are you doing, Dan?
I'm fine. This is gonna get fun hearing that name thrown around. Dan all day. It's gonna be good. Yeah. So where are you located now?
I live in Nashville, Tennessee.
Oh, see, I'm all confused because I know that you were born in upstate New York or that area, Canton, right?
That's right, all the way up on the Canadian border.
At A, and it was, and so I didn't quite. I've looked through I've done some research, and I researched everybody that I speak with. I couldn't nail down where you're currently located. But,
I moved to Nashville 25 years ago. Come February, and it's been a great move, absolutely wonderful.
A really good trombone and low brass player friend of mine, Les Benedict. Yeah. So I was wondering if you knew him because he went through the Jack Daniels band as well.
That's right.
And
Les was gone by the time I was there, but I certainly would run into him, and I don't think we ever played together. Maybe.
He's a great guy.
Yeah. Yep.
But we've had plenty of friends together, and we'll get to all of that in a second. I want to hear about the beginnings of Mr. Fred Coots. Now, your distant uncle, is that who that is, Fred J. Coots?
Yeah, great uncle.
Well, he was probably great with the kind of songs he wrote.
Yeah, he did all right.
Yeah, Santa Claus is Coming to Town, and some of my favorites, You Go to My Head. My gosh. His compositions have been in my head ever since I took an interest in music. I mean, what other ones? Love Letters in the Sand. Big hits.
Yeah, For All We Know. That's another one of my favorites.
Really?
Yeah.
The Carpenters recorded that, right? Oh no, it's a different For All We Know. Okay.
Probably a different For All We Know.
For All We Know.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. Wow. Amazing. And I actually was one of the people.
He did all right. Yeah,
So that's wonderful.
What's that?
So how's that? Is that
you broke up there?
I'm sorry. Is that a lineage that carries on through your family, or are you from a musical family?
No, not really from a musical family. Although a family that absolutely appreciated music. My mother played music nonstop, and especially influenced by the stuff she played as we were all going to sleep at night.
I do know.
But yeah, my grandfather
was a minister.
Played a little trumpet while.
Your father was a minister,
he was
right?
A Unitarian minister, and my mother.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, you broke up there.
I'm sorry. Because I researched your mother was a probation officer.
Yes, that's right.
How bad am I breaking up? I'm sorry. Should we try and?
Well, I'm trying to think. It is breaking up quite a bit. I'm trying to think whether I should go. Right now, it's just on my phone line. Should I go on my internet? Would that be helpful?
I think so. Let's try and do this on the internet. You deserve to have a nice constant.
Okay. Let me see how I do this.
You guys are breaking up.
On his end.
It's probably my fault.
So he's going from his phone to his computer. My son is here. He's my tech guy, as you know.
Well, good. I tell you, I'm lucky to know which dog's dish the water goes in. You know.
Well, that's why.
Let's
Aaron
go.
yeah.
All right. Just a minute. That looks good. Let's see if that did it. I'll try it again.
If you want to log off of the phone and log back onto the computer, we can do that.
No, I think I've done it.
Wow. Very nice.
Well, very lucky.
That's great.
Yeah, thank goodness I have a 12-year-old daughter who walks me through this, and it's interesting because my son who lives in Sweden now, his field is artificial intelligence, and he's very sweet about it, but he's so disappointed in me. I can tell when it comes to all this stuff. But that seems good now. That's not. Yeah, my mom. Go ahead.
I was just going to say my granddaughter attends school through Zoom meetings, and
Right.
and they don't quite have that all figured out either. So
Yeah, but both my wife, who's an elementary school teacher, and my daughter are doing that. So yeah.
tough stuff. So now I've seen Jack Daniel's band live before. How long have you been with them?
Well, I haven't played with them in years, and they're kind of defunct now. But I started playing with them when I moved to town here in '96. I played with them for 5.5 years, and I even contracted them for about 1.5 years.
It was a great show.
It sure was, and it out of that grew what became the Titan Hot 5 and the Titan Hot 7. We're all members of what we called the Whiskey Band. You know.
We can get to that in a second. Let's go. I still want to go back and talk about the fact that you got your first toy drum set at age 6.
Yeah, well, yeah, I did. My folks ordered it through the Sears and Roebuck catalog, and it really was a toy drum set. And prior to that, I had traded. Kids in our neighborhood oftentimes would just trade old toys back and forth, and I traded something for a pair of drumsticks. And all of us would go down to the smoke shop and get empty cigar boxes to take all of our school supplies to school in and keep those in our desk. And I found that was great to play on. So before that, I just had these secondhand drumsticks and a secondhand cigar box. And
that's okay. Yeah, it's really kind of funny when cajon started hitting as a percussion instrument, and guys sitting on boxes hitting them. It took me right back to that time in our childhoods when you would just basically hit anything you could play on.
That's right. Yeah, I still do.
Sorry, I tend to ramble, so just hit me
ramble
on the side of the head with one of your drumsticks, and we'll get the back. So yeah, I thought it interesting. You obviously were a bit of a wonderkind. I tell you one thing I didn't know. I couldn't find. Were you at the Hugh Williams High School?
Yeah, Hugh C. Williams High School.
Because I couldn't find that listed for you, but I checked out Canton, and it seemed to be the only high school in the area. Yeah,
that's right. It's a small town. I was only there for 3 years. I graduated early. I'd been doing a lot of stuff in the North Country. There are 4 universities within 10 miles. And from the time I was about 14 or so, I started auditing classes and kind of worked my way in there. And when I was a senior in high school, I became adjunct faculty at St. Lawrence University. And so that kind of took me away. And I kind of wanted to get out of high school quickly. And I found I could do it in 3 years. So
I went the other direction. I got rid of all of my required classes, and I took nothing but music classes my senior year. Yeah. So, I mean, I identify with wanting to be done with the high school stuff and get on to what you want to do.
Well, in retrospect, getting out in the real world is for a long time. So it probably wouldn't have hurt me to stay in high school a little bit longer.
Were you playing drums in high school?
Oh yeah.
I mean, in the band and all that good stuff.
Oh God, yeah, in everything, band, stage band, orchestra, small ensembles. I was taking music theory classes, which they set up just for myself and a couple of other people. I started playing some early music then. That kind of became something I did for 6 years later on.
Did you have a drum teacher yet at that time? An actual
well,
individual?
I had the school drum teacher from the beginning, but then I started to go over to Crane School of Music, which is part of Potsdam State, 10 miles away, and study first with graduate students and then with Jim Petersack, who was the percussionist there for years and years.
So you did go through the rudimental route and
oh gosh, yeah.
Yeah, well, I see I'm a drum corps guy too.
Yeah.
And so I know a little bit more about this than most tuba players, but.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, all of it. And still, that is a big influence on my approach to drum set and my approach to playing. You know.
Yeah. Good foundations, and it also gives you a nice pathway to interesting rhythms if you remember all your rudiments and
well, yeah, I mean, you know, this morning it was a big part of my practice. You know, I still always, and applying them to the drum set and applying them to, you know, back and forth between your hands and feet, and then go back in and try to make them musical as opposed to just an intellectual exercise. You know,
I could never get my paradiddles fast enough. Anyway, yeah, I did see that you started giving lessons at St. Lawrence. Is that what happened there?
Well, I guess the first lessons I was giving were some drum lessons, but then I started teaching composition and analysis, counterpoint, and then I put together a course. It was just called Rhythm, and it was for other instrumentalists, and it was basically just working on rhythm reading, and then eventually became the director of their jazz ensemble and stuff.
Wow. I'm sorry, and I don't mean this to be demeaning to other people in early music or in early jazz for that matter, but it's very seldom you find somebody who plays this style of music who gets along well with the theory part of things. Is that a good way to put it?
Yeah, I think so too. But you know, I think in reading music, let's say, is not music, and music theory is definitely not music. They're tools. They're helpful tools, but they're very, very incomplete. I mean, even, you know, modern notation certainly doesn't tell you all you need to know. But it's a great way to convey ideas in a relatively quick manner.
I think that becomes really apparent. For example, I'm a finale guy, so I do a lot of my student writing and stuff on that. But does it turn out music? No.
Right.
You know, it's so mechanical, and the nuance that we require to actually get an emotional response to it. You're right. There's a difference between making music and knowing music, you know.
Right. And you know, you almost can't put in words how to groove, how to swing, what exactly the subdivision is about, depending on the people you're playing with at the moment. So, and I'm not one of these guys who sits down and just lays it down. This is the way it's going to be. I listen to the ensemble interpretation of that.
Oh, you're way too musical for.
Well, but you know, the thing is you want to lock in. You want to lock into what's going on, and if it's off by a smell, it's not going to feel good. You know?
I mean, for my personal taste, I found that it works either way as long as somebody makes the decision. I mean,
right.
It's great to be part of the ensemble and take in what's going on time-wise with your front line. But I really appreciate a drummer who says, "Hey, this is where it is." You know,
yeah.
So that approach, I think, is especially within jazz, because a lot of times jazz musicians are too nice and aren't willing to let, and they want to make it a committee. And
Right.
great music can't be a committee. It has to be, there has to be a focus somewhere.
Yeah, you're right. Well, it's got to work, and it's got to work immediately. And I think the best musicians are those who could, within the first measure, see where people are putting it and agree and go there. I
Right.
work an awful lot with piano players, just piano and drums, and every piano player approaches cadences differently. Their feel, how they're subdividing the eighth note is a different thing. And in that situation, especially, I'm an accompanist and I've got to go with what they're doing. And so I'm going to play differently with every piano player.
Oh, let's talk about playing with girl singers. No, I'm
Oh,
you want to talk about nuance in time?
well, yeah, that's right. Nuance
interesting
in
thing.
time yeah.
Well, it's funny, and it's unfortunate. I don't know if you've experienced this. A lot of the trad guys or Dixieland guys. The only reason my channel is called Trad Jazz is because it's not politically incorrect to say Dixieland, which
Oh, that's right.
we can get into our conversations about that.
Yeah.
But so I'm not a English revivalist from the 1950s. That's not exactly what I'm shooting for here.
Well, trad. I think trad is a term that encompasses more styles. I mean, when I think of Dixieland, I first go to late 40s, early 50s.
Right.
That kind of feel, or real Chicago style. So trad to me covers a lot more bases.
I don't know if you've seen any of the previous interviews I've done.
I've seen parts of a couple because I just, since you contacted me, have been
I'm glad
aware.
you did that. But that's something that comes up in almost every conversation is the fact that the labels are actually a product of scholastics and academics, not so much of musicians.
Absolutely. And when these things were happening, they were not calling it that. You certainly are going to start out by calling something new trad jazz, but I found that people well into the 30s were calling jazz ragtime still. And
well, see, I have a problem with the fact that people that say that early jazz came from ragtime, they were definitely parallel, but I'm not exactly sure that they were born of one was born of the other. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Well, I think it's just like music analysis, and it's just like music theory. It is a shorthand way of summing up things, leaving out the details, so you can say, okay, 90% of the time, Corelli did this, and so to sound like Corelli, you've got to do that. Well, no, yeah, I have problems with shorthand ways of defining someone in a few words, or defining a style in a few words. Spend some time and get to know it.
The bottom line is, and I mean, kind of the agreement that's come to, the bottom line is they're guys trying to make a buck. They're trying to make a living. And musicians trying to make a living. I think that's a good definition of early jazz. Is they're musicians trying to make, like we all are still doing.
Yeah.
Trying to find a way to put some food on the table. And so you play what people want to hear, whatever that may be.
Yeah, you do. And the influences are not necessarily with some great foundation. I mean, how many times am I going into the recording studio, having just heard something on the way to the recording studio that is like, wow, this is so cool. And we get in there and all of a sudden we're trying something or we're talking about it and said, hey, did you hear John Kirby's band doing this? And it's like, no. So I play it and it's like, wow, that's great. And all of a sudden we're recording something like that, influenced by that. Performances, as well. So I think stumbling across things and letting it influence you is a wonderful part of evolution. And just because you heard some small ethnic group playing some Latin stuff on the street doesn't mean you have a handle on that style. But if you're competent enough to to take something from it, sort of take some essence from it and employ it, that's how you create new styles.
Well, it worked for Stan Kenton.
Yeah,
But
sure did.
not only that, it also worked for Jelly Roll Morton. But that's beside the point. That's beside the point. You know,
Yeah.
I don't think a lot of people understand how cross-pollinated the style of music is, and I mean not only within genres, but even within. Gosh, I said that wrong. In other words, it doesn't have to be Latin versus Western, right, or it doesn't have to be Asian versus I mean, Tennessee. You living in Tennessee, there, how do you can't get away from the country stuff? And I'm sure that you're recording it and involved within that genre also.
Well, you know, what's interesting is there's every style of music going on here that you can imagine, including the opera and the symphony and the ballet. Mm-hmm. You've got a big part of the recording industry is happening here. So there are all sorts of hybrid musics that are coming out of stuff. And it's a very fertile ground. Every day, the stuff that I'm listening to is affecting the stuff that I'm playing. And there's so many like-minded people that are doing that. Who are, I've got a good friend who's a great jazz player, very inventive, has recently gotten into string arrangements from movie scores from the 30s to the 50s and is very enamored with that. And so is writing in that style. You know, so that nothing squeaks by. Occasionally there'll be an open rehearsal at the symphony where they're doing, you know, Mahler or something, and they invite musicians to come in, and everybody has a score, and you just follow along. And I start to look around and realize, oh, I know those guys from the Grand Ole Opry, you know, and look, they're the Wooten brothers, and there's, you know, Jeff Coffin, and it's like, wow, all these people, I didn't know they were classically trained. I didn't know they were interested in that. But you'd be surprised how many people are open to everything that's around and get excited about it.
For a long time, I don't know if you know this or know anything about me. I was the first tuba player with a group called Banjo Mania. Mm-hmm. And so I was told that I was the first tuba player on the stage of the Grand Ole Opry.
Great.
But which is kind of interesting. Yeah.
Was that with whom you were playing?
Yes, I was playing with Banjo Mania at the time.
What year was this?
Oh golly, probably late '90s.
Oh, okay.
Somewhere around there.
Great.
With Brad Roth and Doug Maddox and that group of guys. So a little funny story aside is we played a bluegrass festival once, and of course I was like a pair of brown shoes on a tuxedo, running around with a tuba. But the next year we went back to the same festival, and there were actually 3 tuba players in groups, and so I was thinking, oh my God, what have I done?
You started. Obviously, they liked your playing. You know.
Either that, or they couldn't find a string bass player. They said, "Oh, okay, we can do that." Now let's talk about the Titan Hot 7. A very good friend of mine that I've known for a very long time, Flip Oakes. Yeah, and great guy. I've known Flip since before the Wild thing, since before he was doing this trumpet thing, and great guy and a wonderful player.
Sure is.
Although. I'm just going to say, although he's very particular about how he likes his arrangements. Yeah,
and he's very particular about his sound and what he expects out of a band, and that's great. It was a blast working with him for all those years in the Titans. He came in. Let's see, he followed? Jeepers. Well, Chuck Bond was our cornet player from the beginning. And then we had somebody else for about a year. And I can't remember. It's my age, I guess. But it Flip's great.
Yeah, he's a lot of fun to be around and a really sweet guy. Of course,
he really is.
Joyce has always been very nice to me, and I love.
Yeah, Joyce particularly loved the the moonshine I would bring from Tennessee, that I had a little connection, and I would bring it in, and she absolutely loved it.
For a while there, I worked for a year with the people from the people from Southern Comfort.
Yeah.
Booze. So anyway, I'm just saying we have that kind
That's
of
right.
booze.
The booze connection.
And I guess Bill Allred's played with the band before too.
Yeah, he was with the band in its last incarnation. Originally it was a fellow by the name of Lewis Brown, who I met when I first came to town, and it was one night I was asked to come down and listen, and ended up getting hired for the drummer for that band and the Jack Daniel's Silver Cornet band. And I'd given myself 6 months to break into the scene here in Nashville, and it all happened one night. And so that was great.
I'm trying to remember. I'm sorry. I should know better than this. Did Jack Daniels carry both a mallet player and a percussionist, or was it the same guy?
Well, it was a mallet player who was the percussionist and a drum set player.
Oh, okay. So got it.
Yeah.
So you weren't the
That's right.
mallet player.
No, I was not the mallet player. Although I played mallets for years, back in my days of learning percussion, and until, of course, I started playing with people like John Beck and Chris Norton and people who could really, really play. And so I stopped doing that. But I would keep some of the Jack Daniels instruments, marimba and xylophone, in my basement off season and reworked some of my chops, and loved doing that. Drove my wife crazy. Yeah.
Oh, I don't know. You can have floor mallet work. That's much too difficult for me. Although I've had to teach it, that's really cool. And I'm sure that you're having a strong background in grounded theory. Didn't hurt that at all.
Yeah.
Now, the person who got me really on the bandwagon to try and contact you to do this was Mark Caprion.
Yeah. Great guy. Now, he's in the Holland Coots Jazz Quintet, which is kind of is doing very, very well. I love it. Originally, I'd been playing a ragtime festival in Durango, Colorado, and the director wanted to expand a little bit and asked if I could put together a group for that festival. And so I thought of the 5 guys I would really want, and they all said yes. And so there was Mark Caprion on cornet, Evan Arnston on reeds, Brian Holland on piano, Steve Pacall out of Minneapolis on bass, and myself.
Actually,
and before
I tried to contact Steve for an interview, and he decided he wouldn't be interesting enough. So that's okay.
Oh gosh, he's very interesting. Yeah, Pickle, he's a great guy.
Yeah, Howard Miata actually recommended him to me.
Yep, he's wonderful, absolutely wonderful. But before we had played our 3rd set, we were hired at 3 festivals, and so it worked out well. I brought the guys to Nashville and recorded an album, and it's been a blast.
So. Yeah, I see. You've actually have done. I guess the past few years you've done a lot of work with Brian. So
yes. Well, Brian and we had met before, but we didn't play together until we were in Rwanda, Africa. We were brought over by the Swiss ambassador to do some stuff. He had an idea. He was going to bring ragtime back to its roots, and unfortunately, I didn't want to tell him that ragtime didn't start in Rwanda, but why mess up a good trip?
Sure.
So we really enjoyed each other's playing and vowed to do an album. So within about 3 months, we recorded our first album, and it's 14, 15 albums later. We do a lot of duo work, but then we have a trio called Bad Rhythm with a great legendary guitarist, Andy Reese. And it's called Bad for Brian, Andy, Danny.
Oh, okay.
And
as opposed to Bed when it was Bill and Eddie, right. And yeah.
That's right. And I just explained that to Dan Barrett, and he was like, "Oh, okay." All right. So, and then Andy couldn't play. He was working with Vince Gill, and he couldn't play a festival he was booked on. So we brought in uh, Pat Bergeson, who's another legendary guitarist and great harmonica player, probably considered one of the best in the world. Plays blues harmonica chromatically. Is one of very few who can do that.
Wow.
And he's considered one of the best. And so the next time we were hired back, they hired everybody, and it became Big Bad Rhythm. So we did that, and then we have a trio called Groovis. That's with Steve Bacall, Brian Holland, and myself. We do work with 2 pianos and drums with Carl Sonny Leyland.
I just interviewed Sonny.
Yeah. So we do 2 piano and drums on that. We've got all these different incarnations, and we have a new Western swing band, which is exactly what we're talking about, the meetings of 2 different genres. Steve Bacall, Brian Holland, and myself, who are really a 1930s style trio, mixing with Tommy White from the Grand Ole Opry, Joe Spivey from the Time Jumpers, Vince Gill and everybody else, and Andy Reese as well. And it's wonderful, just a great, so we do that as well. So
very cool. So you're getting enough of shuffle playing in for the.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
It's great. That Bob Wills sound is something I was always very fond of. That the country swing.
Yeah.
Roots.
Well, it was some parallel playing with that early jazz, and
What's funny is a lot of people don't understand the third contention of that kind of within that atmosphere was Hawaiian music, which is
right.
where the steel guitar came from, and that always blew my mind when you get that triumvirate of country swing and then Hawaiian on top of it, and then swing on top of that.
That's right. That's
very
right.
Interesting.
And that's what I love working with Tommy White. He's such a magnificent pedal steel player. And he and I first met, and I hired him to come to New York and do an album with John and Bucky Pizzarelli. Bucky wanted to do a Western swing album. And so that's what we did. And it was a blast. And Tommy and I had a great time.
Wow. I just see, I was just looking through my notes on you.
Yeah.
My alphabet, no. And it's obvious that you've met a lot of the same people. Look like a lot of them are jazz party folks.
Yeah.
I grew up with Dan Barrett, by the way.
Did you?
Yeah.
So
we went to college together in Costa Mesa.
Yeah. Yeah.
And,
well, then Brian Shaw.
Brian Shaw was my best friend actually still is.
He's a great guy. I need to call him. I call him every couple of years. It's been way too long. I love hanging out with him, and I've really enjoyed recording in his studio. And
yeah, well, Brian and Dan and a handful of other guys all went to the same college about the same time, and they're the ones who pulled me away from playing high note trumpet in Latin bands and made me a Dixieland tuba player.
Great.
And, Dan Barry used to drive to my house and pick me up for school, and a great guy. Yeah. Anyway, there's just one of the names I saw. John Allred, I've known. Of course, I live in Anaheim, so anybody who's been through Disney, is somebody who's ended up on a stage with me at some point in time. Although I didn't, I was one of the few that haven't worked at the park as an employee. So it's kind of interesting. I also see that you've worked with Bob Schultz.
Absolutely. Love working with Bob. Yeah, he's just a great person. He was part of a band we put together for Sandra Day O'Connor. The State Department wanted to turn an adobe house that she and her husband built in, I think, 1950 or something. And it became a place where they brought all sorts of world leaders in, and she, sort of mediated. And they want, even though she didn't live there anymore, they wanted to buy this back and move this adobe house and make it a mediation center. And she said, that's fine, but I don't want any taxpayer money going into it. Let's try to raise some money. So Bob Schultz and a bunch of other people and myself were hired, and we did a couple of fundraisers for her and the moving of this house. So, and then Bob and I have played the last few years with Pat Yankee,
Sure.
who's now finally retired, and
Yeah,
great lady.
I love Pat. Love Pat. I had a chance to be on stage with her once at the Sacramento Festival.
Yeah.
Many years ago. But not only a tremendous singer. I'll tell you what impressed me about Pat, if you don't mind me saying, is the fact that she knew what she was doing.
Yes.
And I mean that in the best way.
That's right. Absolutely.
She could call keys and direct traffic and front the band, and she knew exactly and I hate to say it, that's pretty rare when you get on stage with a chick singer.
Well, you know, the thing is that she stands out as with such natural, she's so comfortable in her skin. She deals with hecklers beautifully in this wonderful way that she's got great comebacks, and she does it all with a twinkle in her eye. But she's the real deal. She's absolutely the real deal. Even, in her 90s, she was a blast to perform with. It's great. It's great. I love working with her, and it was fun to do that with Bob as well.
Well, one of the things I wanted to accomplish with this show, is basically to archive these personalities and all of us that play this style, because a lot of us haven't spent any time talking to us. People like to listen to our music and see us at different performances and things. But
that's right.
But like I said on my intro for this channel, I think all of these people have stories worthy of movie scripts. And I wish Hollywood listened to that sentence from me and start looking into this and doing a better job with what they do with musicians.
Yeah, I think so too. People have often, said to musicians, why don't you write a book, or why don't you got to put this all down somehow. And I think, well, you know what, this is what all my friends do, so this isn't that unusual. But it is, and I've had time of late to sort of reminisce. Usually I'm going from one festival to the next, and, it's interesting to see all the places that music has taken me and all the stuff that I've gotten to do.
Yeah.
I never could have afforded to travel the way I've traveled,
Yeah, exactly. And my kids found that out when I came off the road eventually. All of a sudden my daughter wasn't going to England twice a year with me, type of thing.
It's interesting too, because not only do the musicians have an interesting past and some things to say and relate, but I've found that the fans do oftentimes. And that's what I've enjoyed about doing so many cruises, is you get some time to actually spend time with these people. And you realize that these people are not only going to festivals and not staying home on their couch, but they never stayed home on their couch. They've done interesting things. And for me, that's been one of the great rewards about being a musician, is I've gotten to know so many people who grabbed life by the horns and did things and are still doing things.
Oh, absolutely. It certainly does draw contrast to those who live lives and those who try not to die. That's a little morose. That's right. But it's part of what helped me make that decision. As I was getting older, I all of a sudden found out that I was a type 2 diabetic, and you had come to grips with whether or not those two ways to live. Whether you want to spend the rest of your life being alive, or you want to spend the rest of your life trying not to die.
Right. Well, absolutely. But I think that has to do with how one should play music as well. because trying not to die is a fear-based mindset. And you can make a direct analogy to playing music. Trying not to die on stage, you're going to sound like crap. But really living it, enjoying it, finding the joy in it, and being in that moment, and not being full of fear, that's the way to play.
It's funny that you say that kind of. I mean, it's a great realization, but playing in general, being on stage, especially within the jazz context, is very much analog to life.
Yeah.
And I found out maybe a little bit later than I should have, that people are what they play. That if I like the person,
That's
I
right.
usually just loved what they played. And I've been on stage with people, I just go, that's kind of odd. And I realize that that's who they are. That, the reason
That's
I
right.
don't enjoy progressive bebop is because I can't relate to somebody that's scattered.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't mean to sound simplistic about it, because
No,
I
but
played that stuff,
But I think too that the best musicians, in my opinion, are the people that give it all away. They open up. They're totally vulnerable. They are as excited about what the rest of the band is doing as what they're putting out there by a long shot. And my approach is I play based on what I'm hearing. I play based on what you're playing, and that's about giving up of your own self, becoming part of this community.
Right.
And that's what I enjoy. And the community is not just then who's on stage; it's who's in the audience. We're talking about the human condition, and the people in the audience know just as much about the human condition as we do. We may know the details and the facts about creating the music, but other than that, we're exactly equals, and that I love.
I've never really quite approached it that way. I mean, if anything, I put more weight on the audience. In the past, personally, I always saw myself as someone. What I enjoyed the most was lifting the burden off of my audience. Is seeing people who haven't smiled in a while smile, or tap their foot, or try and transcend what was going on around them for that moment that they were listening to me play. And I tell my students, because I'm a teacher also, I tell my students that we are kind of the doctors of the soul,
Perfect.
in a lot of ways,
Yeah, but that feeds us too. I mean, as you say, their response is, we're stating something, and they're looking at us going, I understand how you feel. And then we're both going, wow, we both feel this. And I think that's so
why
much
we do it.
Why we do it. Yeah.
Now, so I was talking about the reason for the show is one of the things I miss the most from my days really hitting the festival circuit hard is sitting around the musicians' lounges, talking to fellow musicians, talking about things in common and things that are different, and people we know, and what's going on in the world, and relating to other musicians is different than relating to non-musicians. I remember when I first married my wife, and we would go to a family gathering of in-laws, and they thought I was from Mars,
right?
Or something. And I don't mean, I'm not trying to be condescending. They just couldn't relate to almost anything I did, it seemed.
Right. Well, I've found that as well, but then I try to find what we have in common, and I think when that happens, then you can start. Well, then things naturally open up. They start asking about, well, what's it like when you do this, and then if you can relate it to something they know, then all of a sudden you've made that connection. But at the same time, asking them about what they do and what they know, that's equally important.
Well, sir, you sound like a drummer who I would be happy to get on stage with any time.
Well,
there's only been a handful, to be honest with you.
What do they say? It takes one hell of a drummer to be better than no drummer at all.
That's very much the thinking within traditional Dixieland circles.
Well, there's some truth, and this is something that Dan Barrett talks about, is that you need, as a musician, to learn how to do no harm. Sort of the musical,
That's a great quote.
Yeah, and there are tricks to doing that. If you're up on stage and you don't know the bridge, then know how to lay out till you hear what's going on, and then you'll know the bridge. And it's the musical Hippocratic oath, to do no harm. Yeah.
That's interesting. I'm going to have to give him crap about that. Anyway, it's been a delight. Is there anything you'd like? I'm just going to give you some time here to plug or promote anything you'd like to promote.
Well, jeepers. I think really we are in a situation now where things are not that accessible, but they are if you go to YouTube and check out stuff. Take this opportunity to do the things you didn't have time for. And I think you will stumble across musicians you hadn't heard of, and then you can continue that and maybe hear them live. There are a lot of festivals that are going to need people coming to them when it's safe. And so keep track of them.
Right.
The Syncopated Times is a great publication to keep track of that and what's going on. That's a wonderful publication out there. See live music as much as you can, and see things that you might not have thought you would be interested in. I can't tell you how many times I've been carrying drums in to some setting, and somebody will say, "Oh, jeepers, I hope you're not going to be too loud," and and then at the first break, them saying, "Wow, I didn't know that these could be played like that," and
Sure.
and so take chances, and there's so many preconceived notions that are just things that are holding us back from living life, from being exposed to beautiful things.
One of the things I'm really hoping for this show is that as people watch these interviews and hear these personalities, that they go, "I wonder what he's like," and they look up the music.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really one of the things I especially the younger people who are watching this, and there are a few, would say, "Gee, that's kind of cool. I wonder who Danny Coots is. I wonder if there's a YouTube video with him on there, or Dan Barrett, or any of these guys, Sonny Leyland."
Yeah.
And because it's really important, the stuff that these people play that I'm interviewing is even more delightful than what they say. So
Well, I mean, if we could say it, we wouldn't have to play. There are two ways of getting to the person, and you're absolutely right when you say that. People play who they are, and that's surround yourself with good people and good musicians, and you'll have a great time playing music.
Well, Danny, this has been a blast. Thank you so much for doing this.
It's my pleasure. Absolutely my pleasure.
And Mark Capcom, you did good by recommending him. He was a wonderful interview, and hopefully we'll find a time when we can actually climb on a stage together.
I would love it, and I know it's coming up around springtime. I bet things are going to start.
We can only hope. All right, sir.
Thanks,
you
Dan.
take care now.
Absolutely, you as well.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for watching Trad Jazz Today. Dan posts new interviews every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Make sure to check out the archive of past shows, and please give us a thumbs up when you subscribe to the channel. Bye.